Ladies and gentlemen, introducing, for the very first time in probably 30 years, the Musicmaster bass amp. I'll do a little bit of a sound demo, but I just want to get all of my thoughts out on paper here before we do any testing. So basically, this amp was produced by Fender in the 70's, and I believe into 80. I can't remember exactly what the date range on it was. I've done a lot of research on this amp. Basically, the story behind this amp is my mom tipped me off to an estate sale that was happening in my hometown. I live in Brooklyn right now, but in my hometown, there were 3 different deceased estates of musicians all happening at the same time on this local auction site, and they had everything, dude. I'm talking boxes of hundreds of new old stock tubes, boxes of vinyl, amps, vintage Gibsons. He had a fucking pre-CBS P bass, and I saw this amp at the exact time in my life when I was very interested in picking up this amp, which might be the last failing bastion of vintage Fender amps that are actually decently affordable. But even this amp, the best price I could find on Reverb/eBay for this guy was like $700. And of course, that one was in mint condition because these were sold as practice amps. The Musicmaster bass tube amp is a 12-watt single speaker, hand-wired. It was the last model of hand-wired amp that Fender made in the factory. Point-to-point solder, and it sounds cool. It's been quite a journey because I bid on the auction remotely from Brooklyn, and then my mom had to go pick this up and some other bits and bobs I wanted this auction for me. And then I came into town for Thanksgiving, took the whole thing apart, cleaned it as best I could, which didn't work very well. This faceplate, there's a bit of grit and grime on the faceplate that just doesn't really come off. And I learned it's because they take the aluminum chassis, they screen print it, and then they put a bit of a clear coat over the top of it. So the oxidation is happening under the clear coat, so unless you want to scrub away the clear coat and risk fucking up the silk screening, it's not really worth getting into. But all of the capacitors were beyond repair. I plugged this thing in at home for the first time, and I cranked it all the way with the tubes that came with it, and it was just this weak, shitty, small signal. You could barely hear it even cranked, and I was getting nervous about blowing something, so I turned it off, and then I had it shipped to my apartment in Brooklyn, which I then took into work to work on in my spare time. The capacitors had to be changed, so I went online and I found a website, which I will link in the description, that sells kits of essentially every tube amp that Fender ever made. This guy has compiled kits of capacitors that work in those amps. So you can just buy a kit, open it up safely. Disclaimer, don't ever open up a tube amp unless you know what you're doing. There are lethal voltages in these amps that can be stored for very long periods of time in the capacitors. So just disclaimer, unless you know anything about electronics and you're not fully sure of yourself, do not open up an amp like this, especially not when it's plugged in. Jesus Christ. I even put a little sticker in the back to remind myself needed new capacitors. I swapped out the capacitors, safely drained the old ones and tossed them, put new ones in, and then I put some silicone caulk under the big boys in the doghouse so that they don't shake around too much and break the solder joints in there. The other thing that I did was I installed a fuse and I got rid of the famous death capacitor that's in these. So basically there's a capacitor, I believe it's a filtering cap. I can't remember exactly what the purpose of this is, but I think it's just a big ass filtering cap coming in off of hots from the wall. So that capacitor, it's called the death cap because if that cap ever comes loose and touches anything ground on the amp, like let's say it touches the chassis, then you are touching a wire that's going up to your instrument and touching the chassis of the amp It's basically like sticking a fork in the socket. It's like stripping the leads off of a wire plugged into the wall and then touching hot. So it's extremely dangerous, and people have been killed from faults in the death cap. So that immediately had to go. It's honestly crazy they used to ship amps out from the factory with all of these things going on inside them, because there was some incredible danger to be had there. So new caps, put a fuse in. My guess is that this thing hadn't been plugged in for over a decade. I also had to swap the power cable. You see there's a white cable on this one, not the original black cable, because someone had put in a 3-prong power, thankfully, but the cord had been eaten by mice, so they used to insulate cables with twine, and so mice would get in and they'd eat the fucking wires, and so that was an unfortunate surprise when I had already had it plugged in and playing with it, and I had not seen the just open live wires. So always check the cable also. And then the tubes that were original to it, they had some original RCA tubes in it, but they broke in shipping, which is kind of unfortunate. So I just replaced the whole set. I believe the tubes were probably 30 or 40 years old anyway, so I don't imagine they had much more life in them. Let's do a bit of a sound demo. This is the amp at 5. I'm on the bridge pickup. This is a Fat Cat P90. And yeah. It's pretty bright. I think if a speaker swap happens in the future, that will add a bit more ass end to this guy. But here's on the neck pickup. Let's roll the tone all the way off and see what that does. Bridge pickup. I'm not particularly a fan of the tone rolled off. I just like to crank everything and see how it goes. That's on 5. I'm just going to crank it up because I think that's an appropriate volume level, and I think it sounds the best. So that's max volume, max gain, etc. But let's add a bit of boost. So I'm just using an overdrive pedal. This is a Timmy overdrive clone that I made, and I'm just, gain is all the way off. I'm just boosting into the amp. Let's see how much more ass end we can get on add a little bit of gain to that overdrive and see if we can just fucking send her. So yeah, dude, that's just with a little bit of overdrive. Let's do fuzz. I have a germanium filter fuzz, and let's give that a rip. Change the EQ on that. Crank up the It's a sweet little boxy amp, dude. Oh, one last thing too is I had to tighten the tube sockets, which was a little scary. I've never had to do that before, but when I put in one of the power tubes, it was like you could barely, there was no tension in it, you could pull it out. So when I first put the tubes in, and I was playing it, it would get all these pops and crackles and shit because the connections were being broken because it was so wiggly. So I had to go in there with a dental tool, or like a very small watchmaker's screwdriver, and tighten those tube sockets up. Also, again, make sure you drain the caps before you go poking around in anywhere, especially the tube sockets that are taking, basically mains voltage. So just always proceed with caution. I think this thing has plenty of balls to hang with the drummer. Also, I think if you had any fewer watts than 12, you wouldn't be able to hang with the drummer, but like this is the perfect amount. What I like about it is that it sounds essentially perfectly overdriven when you crank that shit all the way up. And I just couldn't have asked for a better setup for an amp. I really, really like it. Anyway, I am in love with this. I'm in love with this. It's less than 30 pounds. You can carry it on the train if you needed to. It's got a decent speaker, not a ton of low end, but it's got that gritty high end. It's got that punky, Fendery, clean but dirty kind of thing going on. It's a nice pedal platform because you don't have to fuck with any of the EQ knobs. You just crank the bitch and let the fucking riffs fly. Go and try one out if your heart desires. Got a really nice bluesy thing happening with the neck pickup. Well, been playing this for an hour and it hasn't blown up yet, so I think I did a good job. So anyway, there's that project.